In June of 2016, I took a road trip with my kids. We set out to drive almost 3,300 kilometers, halfway across Canada, the second largest country in the world. In doing so, I got to cross off a couple things off my list of things to do. Number one was to take a road trip. I had been jonesing to do one for so long, and this just seemed like the perfect opportunity. The second was to take a road trip with both of my kids together, which I've never had a chance to do before. The last real road trip we really did was when my daughter was, I think, 8 or 9 months old, and at the time of filming she was going on 9, so it had been a very long time. And the third was to drive across the country, which I guess technically I really didn't accomplish, but I certainly got to see a good portion of it that I had never seen before, and you know, it's a huge country, so bits and pieces. Some of my fondest memories as a kid are from road trips, and we really never did anything or went anywhere that exciting. Just the same, I wanted to go on an adventure with my own kids and see more of my beautiful country in the process. My wife had been traveling quite a bit for work around this time, and while she was gone, I was home with the kids. She called me from London and told me that she would have to go to Lethbridge, Alberta within the next few weeks. At first, the name Lethbridge didn't really impress me that much, but once I looked it up on the map and realized that it was about 2.5 hours from Calgary, a city that I've always wanted to see, and about 3.5 hours from Banff, absolutely one of my top places to go, I decided we were going too. We left on Sunday morning, June the 5th, approximately 8 a.m., and we arrived in Brooks, Alberta, our first destination, at about 8:30 p.m. Monday night. So within 36 hours, well 38 including the time zone differences, we covered about 3,200 kilometers, including gas stops, sleep, snacks, and washroom breaks. A pretty good gumball, and I'm proud of that as a wheelman. It's an achievement for me to have gone that far within just 2 days. I had originally planned for a 3-day trip, but the 7 to 8 day overall time frame that we had influenced my drive to want to get there as soon as possible and spend more time doing what we came to do rather than just traveling to and from. As a sidebar, I was referring to the original Gumball 3000, not the Playboy rally that it's become, the stuff of legends, the illegal street rally from Chicago to LA in as little time as possible. Obviously, I was keeping it totally legal on this trip, 0 speeding tickets, no radar detectors, a bone stock Honda Civic, and with kids in the car no less. As you can see in the video, the weather on Sunday was not very conducive to photography at all. However, once we got up to the Lake Superior Highlands, I couldn't resist because the sheer drama of the roads mixed with the clouds and the fog and the rain, it really gave a dramatic feeling as I was driving. And prior to this trip, I had never been further west than Windsor, Ontario, or further north than Sudbury. So the majority of this trip was completely out of my comfort zone, entirely in areas that I have never seen before. This was all strumming major chords with me, seeing new places, flying by the seat of my pants, my GPS, my Civic, and my 2 little monsters to accompany me. 2 things I absolutely love in this world are twisty, hilly roads and landscape photography, and this area of the Lake Superior Highlands was absolutely gorgeous, even in the crappy weather that we were experiencing. It was just so exciting to follow these curves around the road and not know what was going to be awaiting me on the other side. And what usually was awaiting was even more stunning vistas of natural beauty. I started this video with shots that I took just north of Sault Ste. Marie on Highway 17, the Trans-Canada Highway, and continuing up north along the west coast of Lake Superior, up through Lake Superior Provincial Park and towards Wawa, and then along the Trans-Canada Highway through Marathon, Terrace Bay, Schreiber, and up toward Thunder Bay. I could not believe what I was seeing in my own province, in my own country, and that it had taken me this long to finally get to see it. It's amazing to me that people travel the entire world to find beauty such as we saw that day. The weather obviously wasn't cooperating with us, but it did finally break towards sunset and allowed us some amazing vistas in the last remnants of the sunset. Being that we were still in the eastern time zone but traveling west, the sunset seemed to be greatly prolonged. Where I'm from in southern Ontario, the sun would normally set at about 8:50 p.m. But here it was well after 10 p.m. and it was still light out, which was certainly a great opportunity for me and my action camera. I'd been trying to photograph and take video with the action camera in its waterproof case, and at the time I wasn't positive about how the results would turn out. We did see some fantastic sights despite the rain. Even though it was a dreary experience for us being out in it, and it made driving less than peachy too, it offered some awesome opportunities for shots. The fog and clouds over the highlands and the roads were just so dramatic. I hoped that the video would convey just how impressive the drive really was, so that I could obviously share it with the world. I had once written "chasing sunset" on a list of future photography goals, and as I was driving west on the north shore of Lake Superior, I was literally chasing the sunset. I mused about that later in a Facebook post. One thing that I observed while driving through northern Ontario and Manitoba is that there's a lot more French and native influences in the naming of places. For instance, a lot of the street signs are labeled as chemin as well as road. I found this nice because I don't think there's that large of a French-speaking community in these areas, but it's certainly a lot more rare to see this influence in southern Ontario where I'm from. This is probably due to the fact that this is our national highway, the Trans-Canada Highway, making people a little more attuned to the diversity of our national languages, and there were definitely more native people living in these areas. Not that I got to explore any of these areas too much in depth, so maybe I'm making something out of nothing much. We in southern Ontario have names like Toronto, Ottawa, Mississauga, which are obviously of native origins, and no one really thinks that much about it where I'm from, so probably neither do the people living in these areas. That probably says something about our society in itself. So why, you may ask, did I set out to drive halfway across such an enormous country by myself with my kids? That was certainly a question that was asked of me by many of the people that I told I was going. My wife was going to be staying in Lethbridge, Alberta, and I figured if we could get accommodations with her for a few days, we could launch some day trips from there. Originally, I had planned to see Banff and Calgary. Banff obviously was a huge draw for me, being one of the most naturally beautiful landscape sites in the world and most certainly in Canada. Number one in terms of photographic exploration and family adventure, and number two, Calgary, was a place I've always wanted to visit and only a couple hours from Lethbridge. Finally, my wife told me about the Dinosaur Provincial Park. I did a little research and thought, what a perfect place to take my daughter, who is 8, and wants to be an archaeologist when she grows up. I can think of nothing I would rather do with my time than take her to some place that would inspire her in her education and career. It was actually a dream of mine, and it's funny how through no coercion on my part, she has always been interested in digging up bones. We used to play a game when she was little where I would ask her periodically what she wanted to be when she grows up. In any case, I thought it would be an amazing family outing, scientifically and historically significant, especially within a Canadian context. Great for her, my son, and me too. Dinosaur Provincial Park would be our first stop. The time constraints around my wife's trip definitely added a dimension and a motivation to this trip. Our entire time frame was 7 to 8 days, so we planned and operated under these parameters. In addition to the sightseeing aspects, the other objective was to document our journey by capturing photos and videos of the entire trip. This was part of the plan as an important side dimension. In past trips, I have taken photos and used the materials for years to come, and this time I added the new development of video as well. Along the way, I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but if I was able to capture half of the amazing things I had seen, it would be great if for no one else but myself and my friends. At the very least, it was something to occupy my mind along the very long drive. The Trans-Canada Highway is an experience in and of itself, and Manitoba and Saskatchewan have really done a great job on their part of the road. In that part of the country, it is considered a central thoroughfare as opposed to a more backwoods route like it is in Ontario. The topography definitely influences that as well. Long and flat and straight in the prairie provinces as opposed to winding and twisting and up and down in the Highlands of Ontario. We had originally planned to take 3 days to reach Alberta. The initial plan was to drive for about 10-12 hours per day, stop, set up camp, chill out for the night, and then continue on the next day. But the sheer excitement of the drive up led us to discuss amongst ourselves, myself and my kids, whether or not we should just burn through the night and get there even sooner. We all agreed that that was the way we were going to go. Of course, it was easy for them because they could just sleep whenever they wanted to, but I was so amped I didn't really want to stop and get a motel or get a campsite, and in that weather, especially, camping did not seem palatable at all. We did stop off a couple of times, and I did catch a few winks here and there, but through sheer determination and good old-fashioned Tim Hortons coffee, I was able to drive throughout the night and on into the next day. Being that it was the middle of the night, the drive between Thunder Bay and Dryden and then further on to Kenora, I really didn't get to see that much of it on the way out, but watching the GPS, I was very impressed by the fact that we were practically driving on a peninsula of land and surrounded by what seemed to be an endless amount of lakes, impressing upon me the sheer vast quantity of this beautiful resource that we have of fresh water in this country.